Morning learning is chutz for shleima filan chaya b'asarach, and for as a aliyah for the neshama of Meir ben Elazar. We're on the Mishnah and Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis. Hamevakeres, an animal that is giving birth for the first time. It's talking about either a sheep or a goat or a cow, and it's giving birth for the first time, which there's a din of bechar, kedushas bechar, that goes on the first child, the first vlad the kosher behemoth, and then it will go to the kayin. The kayin will bring it as a carbon unless it gets a mum. If it gets a mum, then it will be free to eat. And we have all the rules about the mumim. We don't want the kahanim. Kahanim benefit greatly when it gets a mum, that they don't have to bring it as a carbon. They can just eat the whole animal. Anyways, so this animal is about to give birth. Hamakasha leilid. It's not going well. So I guess one of the ways they're helping it along is they sacrifice the uber. Mechatach aver. You can cut off each aver as it emerges. Umashlich klavim. You can feed it to the dogs. Since it hasn't yet emerged, you don't yet have a rive or the head or the rubai of this bechar. It's not a bechar yet. It's only becomes a bechar when it's pet rechem, when it opens the womb, and if you just have a miyat, it doesn't yet have kedushas bechar, and you could take each aver and you don't have to even treat it with kedushas bechar. You could give it to the dogs. Yatsa rubai, but if once most of the animal has come out in this fashion, harezeh yikava. At that point, it gets kedushas bechar, and you have to bury it. And Rashi understands, in either case, whether you machatach as you're going along, or and then eventually the rive came out, or if the rive all came out at one time. The second case was Yatsa Rubai, where the rive came out. Rashi says ke'echas, then you have bikaver. In either case, any subsequent birth from this animal will not be considered a bechar. Zaktumar itmar Yatsa shlish umachroi lo'evet keichav. The rule is that they only have a din bechar if the mother is fully owned by Yidden. But if you had sold part of it to an Ovid Kechavim, or if you had even sold the Uber to an Ovid Kechavim, it's not going to have a din bechar. So what happened in this case? A third of the animal of the Uber was Yaitza, and you sold it to Ovid Kechavim. Because of Yatza Shlish Acher. And then another third came out. So at this point, 2/3, a rive of the animal, has come out through the rechem. Rav Huna Amar Kaddish. Rav Huna says it's Kaddish. Rav Amar ain't Kaddish. Rav will say it's not Kaddish. Gemara explains. Rav Huna Amar Kaddish Kasavar Lemafreya Kaddish. He says when the second third comes out, at that point it became a rive of the Vlad was Yaitza Derech, the rechem of the mother. So we say lemafrei, we go back and we say everything that came out had really been a bechar from the beginning, from the time it came out. And therefore, your sale of the uber that turned out to be a bechar is inapplicable. You don't have the right to sell a bechar to a guy. You can only sell it prior to it becoming a bechar. But since it's lemafrei going to be a bechar, it's not going to be kaddish with the kedushas bechar. I guess the idea is, if you sold the whole thing, then I didn't see this, but I think the rule would be, if you sold the entire ober, then you never have an ability to go lemafreya. You never had the ober that was kosher, that right of it came out to make it that to be lemafreya. Keeping the nafik lerubi, glen milsel, I'm afraid to make kara have a kaddish. So therefore, according to Rav Huna, we say lemafreya, and from the beginning it was always kaddish, and therefore you couldn't sell any part. Umay de zavin like klum zavin. Whatever he sold was not a sale because it was already kaddish kedushas b'chayra. It's too late to sell it. Rabba Amerin Kaddish. Rabba disagrees. He says it's not Kaddish. Kasavar Mikana Labo Kaddish. At the time that you have roiv of the animal come out, from that point on it becomes Kaddish. But since you had already sold part of it, and we don't go back Lamafreya and say that that was not a sale, that it was really Kaddish from before that. So therefore, at the time that you got to more than 50% born, a portion of it belonged to a guy, and therefore it's not going to become kaddish at all. My dezavin Shabbos zavin, what they sold, according to Rabba, will be really part that you sold to the guy will have been sold, and we're not going to treat this as a bechar. So and it will come out l'shitasam that will have an exact opposite psak if you follow this reasoning. The itma. Yotza shlish derech doifen. If the first third, again, you have one of these and kosher behemoths that gave birth to its firstborn, but it was a difficult birth, and the first third was removed using using a cesarean. It came out through the wall of the womb. It was through with the surgery, which is not Peter Rechem. Peter Rechem means it has to come out naturally through the womb, and it could be like we said before. It was cut, and now we're talking about legabi. That portion that came out through the cesarean was cut off, and we're talking about. Obviously, it's not going to be a bechar anymore once it's cut into pieces. But we'll have the question of whether it's going to have kedushas bechar, of how you dispose of it. Does it need a kfura if it's a bechar, or can it be thrown to the dogs if it's not? So in this case, the first third came out derech doifen. There was a cesarean. Ushnei shlishi, and the second 2/3 derech rechem, were born naturally. So in this case, it's going to be exactly the opposite. Huna Amar ain't a kaddish. Rabba Amar kaddish. Huna says it's not kaddish, and Rabba says it is kaddish. In the previous case, Rav Huna was the one who said it's kaddish. We go lemafreya, and Rabba said we're not. Over here, Rabba is the one who says it's kaddish. So Rav Huna Amar ain't a kaddish. Why does Rav Huna say it's not kaddish? Rav Huna l'tamei damar lemafreya kaddish. He says it becomes kaddish lemafreya. So as soon as you have 51% of it was yaitza, then we go back and everything has kedushas bechar. But if 1/3 came out not through the rechem, so at that point it becomes kaddish, but it's not a bechar, because roiv of the 51%, 1/3 is more than half of the first 51%. It's 33% of the whole animal, and it's 66% of the first half. So if we're going to go lemafreya as soon as half of the animal is born, according to Rav Huna, you will have an invalid bechar, since most of it came out at that point. Derech was a yaitza daifen. And most of the first half did not come out naturally, and therefore it's not a valid bechar. Rav Amar Kaddish, Rav who says it is Kaddish, Rav Tamei Dama Mikan La'aba Kaddish, Veruba Derech Rechem Nafik. We look at, and this is a little bit hard to understand, but we look at the point at which roiv of the when roiv of the animal came out from the rechem, that's the point that we look forward, and we say from that point it's a bechar. So as long as roiv of the entire behema, which in this case it was 2/3 came out from the rechem, we're gonna say as soon as the roiv comes out of the rechem, then we from that point on it's kaddish. And since at some point, let's say when you got to the 67% born, so you have 33% came out from the daif, and then 34% came out from the rechem. At that point, you have roiv coming out of the rechem. According to Rabbah, it's going to be, when it's all finished, when it's entirely born, it's going to be have kedushas bechar. You're going to have to dispose of it properly. Utricha. The Gemara says we need both of these dinim, right? Rabba and Rav Huna are both going l'shitasa. So what do we have to tell you? This all depends on the fact that Rav Huna says we go l'mafreya and Rabba says we go mikanu laba. So these are natural outgrowths of those shitas. So what do you have to tell you both of them? So Diyashmin and Rabba, Diyashmin Baha. If we would have just said the first case, Baha Kama Rav Huna, Mishum Delakula. In the first case, actually, in the second case. No. In the first case, he said that it's going to be Kaddish, because if you would have said the other way, it would be Lakula. So therefore, maybe he was Machmer in the first case. Because it would be Lakula to go Bikan Leba. Abal Hach, in the second case, the L'chumra, maybe in the second case where going Mikana Laba results in a chumrah, maybe he's masking to Rabbah in the second case where it was the first third came out, Yaitze Daifen, and Mamaydi Leila Rabbah, Viyat Mabaha, and if you would have said the second case, Baha Kama Rabbah, maybe in that case, Rabbah says that it's that it becomes Kaddish, Mikanu Laba. Maybe in the first case we might Rav Huna, where because he goes l'chumra. Tzricha, that's when you need both of them. Frak the Gemara, Tznan. Frak the Gemara on Rav Huna. Rav Huna says we go l'mafreya. It's not from our Mishnah. Hamavakeres, Hamavakasha leiled, a mother, a kosher mother, behema, it's having a difficult time with its birth. Our Mishnah said, Mechatach ever, umashchal chuklavim. You can cut off the Evarim as they come out, and they don't have a Kedushas Bechar. My la mechatech omeniach. Doesn't it mean that you cut off these limbs and you leave them on the side, and then you wait to see if it's according to Rav Huna, if you will meniach it on the side, and then later at the point where roiv of the Evarim or roiv of the Ober came out, it should get a Kedushas Bechar. So why do we say you could give it to Klavim? You should be required to be covered according to Rav Huna. V'yam lemafeu kaddish, you cover. Why are you allowed to dispose of it by giving it to Klavim? You cover me by it. So Gemara hachamayaskin mechatach umashlich. No, the Mishnah is talking about where you cut them off. At that point, it wasn't yet arrived, and you immediately gave it to Klavim before it got a Kedushas Bechar. Amachatach neniach mai yikva. But the Gemara asks if that's so. So what is the Mishnah? So you're saying the only reason why it was allowed to be given to the Klavim is because you gave it to the Klavim before Roiv came out. That's mashma. But if you had set aside the Evarim that you machatach until there was a Roiv, Itaka would get Kedushas Bechar lemafreya like Rav Huna. In fact, the Gemara at the Tana Sefer Yatzer Rubai, if the entire Roiv came out at one shot, you cover. The nifter min habachayra, it doesn't have the kedushas bechara left. Why do we have to say that the roiv came out all at one time? Let's say that the din of the reish of the Mishnah that it was thrown to the dogs is only if you throw it, you give it to the dogs as it comes out. You cover. Let it say the second case, rather than saying where roiv came out at one time, Say as long as you didn't throw it away, you hadn't get given to the klavim when it becomes a roiv according to Rav Huna, it should l'mafrei become kaddish, and therefore you'll have to be kover it. So it's more hachinami kama. Medrum mechater mashach. That's what the Mishnah. That's what the Mishnah really means. That what you give it to klavim is only if you already gave it to klavim. Al mechater chameniach naskim shiyatza rubai v'yakaver. What the Mishnah is really saying is it gets a din as if it was all the roiv came out at one time, and therefore you'll have a din of kfura. But ein chanami, that is taka the chiddush of the Mishnah, that if you're meniach it, you have to bury it. Boy Rava, holchu beivar nacharoiv or loy holchu beivar nacharoiv. Do we follow the roiv by ivarim or not? This is a very broad question, and the Gemara is going to explain what the question is. Hechidami, under what circumstances? Ilema kagon shiyatza roiv v'miyat aver, where you had a roiv, you had an animal, let's say, that each leg was 10% of the animal. So you had 3 legs, that was 30%, plus enough of the torso, that was another 15%, so it got you to 45. And then the last leg, you only had, or let's say with the torso got you to 49%, right? 3 full legs, and the torso got you to 49% of the animal. And then the 4th leg, which it's the total thing is 10% of the animal, only 2% of it came out. So the question is, do you count that 2% to get you to 51%? We have a roiv by counting the miyat of Eva, kami bayale. Hi miyat de broi basa roiv de Eva shadinale. Do you say, you look at the roiv of the Eva, since roiv of the Eva is inside, you can't use the 2% to get you from 49% to 51%? I basa ruba de over shadinale. Or do we say, no, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you have 51% of the Eva, we don't care the status of each individual Eva. So what says that's not. There's nothing that's telling us to look at the aver whether it's roiv born. The question over here is the roiv of the over was born. There's no question on each individual aver whether it's roiv born. So we don't need to. That certainly would not be a question, and it would be considered that it was born, and therefore will have a status of b'char. We're talking about where half came out with exactly half of the animal came out, and it was roiv of one of the Evarim that came off together with that came out with that chatzai. Can it push you from 50 to 53% or over 50% by looking as if the miyat that's still inside is mitzdaref with the roiv that's outside? Now that the roiv is helping us, that the aver is already roiv outside, maybe we should look at it as if it's fully born and make it a roiv. Since it's only taking us from 50, we're already at 50%, and it wants to take us to over 50%. It seems like if it would have been 49%, it wouldn't go from 49% to 51. It's only because it's already chatzi, so it's most of the way toward being a roiv. So just to push it over the top, maybe that's sufficient. So that's the question. Toshma, frek the Gemara, yotza rubai hareza yikavar. Our Mishnah said, if roiv came out, you could bury it. My rubai, what is this roiv? Ilema rubai mamish. If it means that most of the roiv came out, ad hashal yashmin, the rubai kukulai. We know the rule that rubai is kukulai. What does the Mishnah have to tell us? The din that it's as if it was already born. Elalav could go into yotza chatzay b'roiv aver. Elamai, it must be talking about our specific case, where half of it came out, and you also have a roiv aver. Do you look at the roiv aver as if the whole aver is out to get you over the hump from 50% to roiv? So I want to know, maybe it's talking about the chiddush that we had said before. Even though we had concluded that if you have rubai b'miyat aver outside, we won't disregard that miyat aver because roiv of the aver is still inside. But maybe that's still a worthy chiddush for the Mishnah to tell you. The kamashal and shekina rubai there over the behemoth vaslim basar aver. Maybe it's coming to tell you the first chiddush, the first explanation of this iboy, not the second explanation. So you don't have a raya from our Mishnah. Boy Rava. Now the Gemara is going to ask a little bit more generalized questions about the din that the Peter Rechem makes a bechar. Boy Rava. Karchu b'siv mahu. If someone wrapped around, as we're going to see in the Gemara, the way a leder works, the behemoth starts, some part of the behemoth comes out, and you see that it's about to be born, and I guess they wanted to avoid it becoming a bechar. So they wrapped the remaining portion, the roiv of the behemoth, of the uber that's still inside the mother, they wrapped it with some kind of linen, some kind of palm fiber. Betalisei ma'u, if he wrapped in a talis, which I think Rashi takes that out because it really is the same as the first case. It doesn't make a difference what substance you use. Use something to wrap around it. So then the uber did not physically, was not the peter rechem. It didn't physically touch the rechem when it went out. Maybe that's not considered a bechar. B'shel yasei ma'u, what if it's surrounded by the placenta? In fact, b'shel yasei urchahu. That's normal. It always is surrounded by not the placenta or the amniotic sac, that usually an animal is still inside of it when it comes through. So obviously that's a leda. Ela b'shel yacharis. It's surrounded, somehow they stuck in there another animal shulya. Again, then so maybe that's a little bit better than the first case where you took a totally foreign substance and surrounded it. A shulya is normal for a bechar to have, but it doesn't have another animal shulya. But maybe that's considered enough part of the process that it's considered a leda. Kachasai, achsasai, v'hitziasai, mao. If a person wrapped it around with her hand, the I guess you call it the vet took it in her hand, so therefore the actual uber did not touch the rechem as it was coming out. What's the case? Which I think is the normal way that an animal comes out, normal way of a birth. So, and we're assuming that the birth had already started, and then they stuck the hand in before Roiv came out. But once the Reisha came out, it doesn't make a difference what happens afterwards. P'tirasei, patarte, that was already the pater rechem. It's already a leda once the head came out. El nafuk derech margaloisa. It must be that it was a breech birth that the legs came out first, so it wasn't yet a leda, and now they covered let's say the midwife covered it with the cloth or with the shilya or with her hand. Is that going to be a leda? Another question. Bolseyu chulda, this is a very strange case. A weasel stuck its head into the rechem of the behemoth and swallowed the fetus, the uber, b'yitziyasei, and then it brought it out and it spit it out. So when it left the animal, it was inside the chulda. Mao. What's the question? It's exactly the same as as all the other questions where it was wrapped in something else, and in this case it was wrapped in a chulda. So now it gets even weirder. Ella, balasai, the chulda, the weasel swallowed it in the womb, v'yitziyasai, and it brought it out, v'hichnisasai, then it stuck its mouth back into the womb of the animal, v'kiyasai, and it vomited the vlad back into the mother, and then it was born naturally. V'yatza me'elav, came out on its own. Mao, is that considered to be a peter rechem? Even though it had originally come out inside of the chulda, do we ignore that and say, but now there was a valid Paterech. Another strange case. What happens if you had two wombs that were next to each other and it went straight from one womb into the other, and now it was born from the second animal? Mao, did they potter the lav, did they loy potter? Do we say that you can only have a pet that the second animal had never given birth, and now it gave birth, it was like a surrogate to the first one? Do we say it's not a pet rechem because it wasn't its own child? Or maybe it could also be pet teku. The Gemara says it's a teku. This sounds like a wild case, but it's probably if someone did such a thing as surrogate births, if someone who is not a kayin gives birth with a surrogate pregnancy, right? It was implanted. Do you have to do a pigeon? Do you have to do a pigeon aben on that baby for the mother? I don't know if it's the same din for pigeon aben of a human as it is for an animal, but this sounds wild. But I was just trying to think of how this could apply in reality, and it sounds like it could. Boy Ravacha, niftechu koisle beis harechem mao. What happened if the beis harechem, the birth canal, opened very wide, and the animal slipped out without touching the beis harechem? Avir rechem makdish. Do we say since it went through the birth canal, even though it didn't actually touch the rechem, it's still a pet rechem? It has to actually be pater, it has to push it open, and in this case, it didn't do so. Boy Mar Baravashi. Nekru koisle beis harechem mao. What happened if the koisle beis harechem were removed before? That means the womb is there, but the pathway that the animal goes out from had been removed. It somehow was gone. Gemara, if it's gone, it's not there. So you have essentially a yaitza daifin. It's not going through the rechem. Obviously, it seems obvious that it's not going to be a bachar. We're talking about where it detached, and the beis harechem was attached. Instead of being attached to the mother, it was wrapped around the vlad, the uber. And then the uber eventually went through it, but not attached to the mother. Do we say it only is considered a bechar if it went through the beis harechem while in place by the mother, but not if it's out of place? Or maybe it doesn't make a difference as long as he went through the rechem. What happens if the inner walls of the beis harechem were removed? It means not like the last case where it was totally removed, because that would certainly not be an issue. That we said is going to be like a yaitza daifin. There's another pshat that we're talking about where there's different parts of the rechem, of the beis harechem, where the part that faces toward the outside was still there, but the inner part was gone. So what do you need to pater rechem? Does that have to be the whole tunnel that leads to the outside, or is it enough if it's just the outside section? So, but then the Gemara becomes a little schwer if you say that. He said there's another question that could be relevant. The boy Rav Zera v'Amila bo minei Rav Zera Mabasi. Oimin miruba laparetz. If part of the birth canal is missing, but the part that's still there is roiv, so the part that's still there is a meruba ala paretz from the part that's open. B'yatza derech paretz, but it went out through that paretz. Or paretz meruba ala oimid, or if there's more that's missing than what's standing. But it happened to go out through the portion that's still there. What's the din? Is that considered to be char? We only question where it's part of its where there is some portion of it is remaining. In the case of nigmamu, that the way we had said it, that either everything except for the outside portion is gone, or if, like we said, that the whole inner layer of the rechem is gone. What are we talking about? Parts and Aimid. If it's all gone, we say it's a shaila, then we would never talk about parts of Aimid. We didn't question if it was all gone. That would certainly not be considered to be a valid bukhar. Zok the Mishnah. Behema shemeis uvra b'toich meya. A behema that the uber died while in the womb of the mother. And the raya stuck its hand and touched the uber while it's in the mother. Now the din is a dead animal has a din of an avela. Does this uber also have a din of an avela? The Tanna Kama says it's going to be tar. We're going to learn out from a Kal V'Chaimer why it should be tar. Depends on whether the animal is a behemoth tmei or a behemoth taira. He disagrees with Tanna Kama. He says only a behemoth taira is tar, but not a behemoth tmei. When you touch the uber inside of the mother, the dead uber in the mother, if it was alive, it wouldn't be a problem. Talking about my time at the Tanna Kama. Why does the Tanna Kama say it's always tar? Amar Chizda, Kal V'Chaimer. He makes a Kal V'Chaimer. V'hila imay latira b'achila l'tayla tahara midei nevela. If the mother, the ben pakua, the vlad, if it becomes kosher to eat because of the shechita of the mother, it's considered enough a part of the mother that the shechita helps that you could eat it. Certainly, it's less onerous to make something that's tameh that it should be part of the mother. So certainly it will be considered part of the mother. The guy didn't avail, and the mother's alive, so this will get its mother's din. The over not just will get the mother's din that it's you could eat it, but also get the mother's din with the shechita. It will also get its mother's din that it's not going to be considered an avail. So that only applies to behemoth Torah that has a din shechita, that the uber is considered to be kosher. Behemoth Tmeya is certainly the shechita is not going to help, and the vlad is not going to be kosher to eat. Amakra ki yamas min behemoth zu behemoth Tmeya. Ashihi lachem laachol zu behemoth Torah. The Torah makes a hekesh between a behemoth Tmeya and a behemoth Torah. We say that when a behemoth Tmeya dies, it becomes an avela. Ashahilacham la'acha is a behemoth Torah. When it dies, it becomes an avela. So since there's a hekesh between the two of them, iskash behemoth Tmeya behemoth Torah, ma behemoth Torah over a tar, a behemoth Tmeya over a tar. The hekesh tells you that they're both going to be tar. The uber will not be metame as an avela. But if Yosi Aglili my time, what's the reason for why Rabbi Yosi Aglili disagrees? That he says only a behemoth tahira is going to, the vlad is not going to be metame. The pasuk says, is a reference to behemoths that are not kosher. Kapav is paws. It means it doesn't have hooves. In order for an animal to be kosher, it has to have split hooves. These are things that goes on their hands, so they obviously don't have hooves. And it continues, B'chol hachaya lechas al arba tmei mehem lechem. So we're going to darshan. B'chol hachaya means inside of the chaya, and halechas al arba means is a reference to a behemoth tmeya, because a behemoth tahira we would say halechas al shmeina. Since it has split hooves, we look at each hoof as being two, so it'd really be 8, as we're going to see in the Gemara. If that's the case, that we're saying anything that's inside of a behema, Mahalche kapayim b'chaya to mesilach. I only I was matar those things that go in a chaya. Those things that go in a chaya, something that's alive. I'm saying it's tummy to you. So that tells you that don't not to make the hekesh, and those things that are inside of a tummy are going to be matam.
What's the question? Eliminate color.
What happens if you have a kosher animal, but the animal inside of it is colored? It has its hooves are fused together. It doesn't have split hooves, which we said such an animal is kosher, right? You could eat it, but let it be mitama. The mitama kapayim b'chayahu, because it's a mitama, it's a mahalchi kapayim. It doesn't have split hooves, and it's inside of a live animal. So the Gemara, no, we want to. I explained it a little early. The Gemara at this point hadn't by merit that we're talking about mahalche arba. We thought that anything that's alive, inside anything alive, should be tamei, as long as it's a non-kosher, as long as it doesn't have split hooves, and it's inside another animal, it should always be tamei. But if that's the case, even this kolet should be metama. So the Gemara, no, mahalche kapayim, mahalche arba. The pasuk had said that it's mahalche kapayim, something that goes that doesn't have split hooves, but mahalche arba inside of something else that also doesn't have split hooves. It only has 4 hooves instead of 8. This is a mahalche arba because the animal's feet are fused, and the mother is shmaina. So therefore, the pasuk is not saying that's tamei. Since the mother is a kosher animal, it's not included in the limud to tell you that the uber is going to be tamei in spite of the kal v'chaim. If you have something that resembles a para that's inside a gamel, meaning it has split hooves, it's a deformed gamel. It gave birth to a deformed gamel that looks like a para and has split hooves. It shouldn't be metama. The mahalche shmoyim b'mahalche arbahu. It's not halcha kapayim, so it doesn't qualify for the rebuild of pasuk. So Gemara haylach v'chol haylach l'rabis. It could have said haylach. It says v'chol haylach. That's going to be marbe even this case. Para b'mei gamol. In fact, the Gemara. What about if you have a kolet b'mei? I'm sorry, the rabbis para b'mei gam. Kolet b'mei kluta. Kolet b'mei kluta litama. What if you have the mother and both the mother and the vlad both have fused hooves? So then they each are 4. Litama the mahalche arba b'mahalche arbahu. It's kapayim, which is arba, inside another thing that's arba. So that much, he says, you can make the kal v'chaimer, since the mother itself could be kosher with shchita and it will kasha the uber. In this case, we'll say the kal v'chaimer to be mekadosh it. Okay, we're gonna have to stop over here. We'll have to resume in the middle of this interesting topic tomorrow.
Thank you so much for
have a great day.
Good day.